Every form of intelligence manifests and is expressed through specific skills. The more proficient we become in using these skills, the more elevated our intelligence will be. Each and every one of us has a talent or an attitude for one or more skills that enable us to contribute to the material reality we operate in. Until just a few decades ago, this was sufficient. But today, it's not enough to be even brilliant in handling technical skills alone. About roughly 20 years ago, American sociologist Daniel Goleman redefined the concept of intelligence altogether, making it much more broad, as he also took into account our emotional and relational skills. In fact, he observed that as organizations become more complex, the capacity to have a more effective relationship with oneself and others overshadows many of the most important technical skills. Goleman identified 5 major emotional skills, namely self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation, empathy, and social skills. However, even emotional intelligence seems not to be the answer to all problems that any organization of our days is expected to deal with. In the past few years, this reality that we operate in started manifesting its systemic nature more and more evidently, which cannot be handled with the old tools, no matter how effective they may have proven in the past, and which are still valid in many cases today. And the truth of the matter is that this situation can only get keener from now on. As Sir Francis Bacon, the famous British philosopher, would say, we cannot command nature except by obeying her. And this is exactly what systemic intelligence aims at, to assume a real and effective control on the contexts in which we operate through the observance of the laws of systems. Until only 10 years ago, this would have appeared superfluous or even just mere philosophy, but it's an absolute necessity today. And here's where the systemic skills come into play, capabilities that we need to understand deeply and apply in the everyday management of systems. The first of these skills are relationships, that is, the capacity to interact within any relationship, starting from the dynamics that govern it. At first, it may appear more like an emotional skill than a systemic one, and to some degree it's true, but it's the approach to be different. Working on relationships at an emotional level means to learn how to apply communicational strategies that enhance rapport. At the systemic level, however, we work on the basic causes, that is, the laws that regulate relationships, and not only that. A systemically intelligent individual doesn't settle for just knowing what to do, but wants to understand why a strategy works and another one doesn't. The second skill is control, that is, the capacity to assume more systemic control and power in the context we operate in. Strangely enough, although the topic of control is one of the most absolutely important in the private and professional life of each one of us, there's very little talking about it, if any. We talk about management control, planning, self-control, all very important things, of course, but which don't get into the real heart of control, which is about thinking and acting effectively. Because the only way to attain this goal is to operate systemically, you can see how this skill becomes crucially important as far as the development of systemic intelligence is concerned. The third skill is leadership, the capacity to lead other people towards a desirable goal. Even in this case, the systemic approach to leadership is sharply different from all the others as we dig into the very roots of this topic. From a systemic perspective, in fact, leadership totally focuses on the process and on those laws that enable the achievement of desirable events. Here, it's not about strengthening the individual from a character or emotional point of view, but about his capacity to produce desirable events as a result of aligning oneself with the laws of systems. The fourth skill is self-esteem, the capacity to become psychologically stronger in order to reach our life goals more easily. It's somewhat weird to think about self-esteem as a skill. Usually, it is associated to a certain emotional or mental state. But in this case, it's related to our capacity to, on one side, change the vision that we have about ourselves by strengthening the worth that we all attribute to ourselves, and on the other, to understand and enable the deep bond that exists between the skill and the other fundamental components that trigger the so-called systems dynamics. The fifth skill is abundance, the capacity to identify all the resources that we already possess and to acquire new ones. There's a lot of confusion concerning this topic. For one thing, we tend to see abundance from a materialistic point of view, and second, like the lucky outcome resulting from a series of winning strategies and actions. Actually, the skill of abundance is the mental and emotional capacity to generate resources, talents, as well as the most favorable situations and conditions for creating new opportunities. Abundance is tightly bound to the skill of self-esteem. One inexorably affects the other. The sixth skill is freedom, the capacity to get rid of all the material, emotional, mental, and spiritual ballast that prevent our evolution as leaders or even simple individuals. Freedom is usually intended only as a state where our right to express ourselves materially, which includes freedom of movement, speech, or thought, is seriously compromised. From a systemic standpoint, however, freedom involves our capacity to overcome not only our external impediments, but first and foremost, our internal ones that prevent us from elevating ourselves and therefore evolve as individuals. The seventh and last skill is direction, the capacity to strengthen our clarity about our purpose and intentions so that we can lead ourselves and others towards our true destiny. The more we operate systemically, the more we detach ourselves from our old way of thinking and acting based on the fulfillment of one or more needs, favoring ethical and sustainable goals, which is only possible if we are acquainted with the dynamics and laws of systems. In a world where confusion and fear for our future is a more than tangible reality, the capacity to bring clarity on where we want to go, which is reinforced by the awareness of knowing how systems behave, provides an absolute advantage for whomever is called to lead himself or others.